We start here in Gauteng this hour, where the South African Human Rights Commission has cleared EFF leader Julius Malema of hate speech. This follows a number of complaints brought against him. 5 complaints were brought against Malema and a member of the party between 2006 and 2018. These utterances on public platforms have provoked anger, among others, with some calling for the Human Rights Commission to find him guilty of hate speech. But the Commission says none of the utterances met the threshold for hate speech.
The statements involved one about land reform and occupation, in which Mr. Malema said that white people had slaughtered people like animals during colonial times and that he is not calling for the slaughter of white people, at least for now. The Commission found that that does not amount to hate speech viewed contextually, in that the historical context shows violence and dispossession of land, the social context shows the vulnerability of the African group, and the factual context shows that the topic of the speech was land reform and not inciting harm against white people. The other 2 of the statements concern remarks made by Mr. Malema against the Indian community, both that the majority of Indians are racist, but also that Indians enjoy more socioeconomic resources than Africans and also treat Africans in an ill manner. So the Commission found, again, looking at it in this context, that the intention objectively of Mr. Malema was not to incite harm or propagate hatred against the Indian community.
For more on the story, we're now joined in studio by SABC reporter Hitekani Magwedze, who has been covering the story for us. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for coming through.
Good afternoon, Palisa.
Yeah, now, for someone who's not quite familiar with the complaints, just take us back to the complaints and the nature of them.
So there are 5 sets of complaints brought against Malema and a member of the EFF in Mr. Gadi, who is a member of parliament. The first one was, of course, where he spoke about we're not calling for the slaughter of white people for now. And of course, this is in a bigger context of his speech. But that's the part that got circulated, and that's the part that provoked anger among a lot of people. The De Klerk Foundation, of course, laid a complaint against him because of that part of his speech. The other ones relate to him talking about the Indian community, him saying that they don't treat black people in KZN correctly, saying that Indian people, the majority of Indian people are racist, saying that not all, but a majority. Of course, the DA laid a complaint against him on that one. The other one is, I think, in 2018, where he sang the song Kiss the Boer instead of Kill the Boer. That also led to people getting provoked by it and laying a complaint against him. The last one was in Parliament. Mr. Gadi, who is a member of the EFF, laid a complaint, wrote on Twitter that Mr. Maimani was a garden boy, and that led to the DA laying a complaint.
So that's the gist of the complaints. Yeah. But then the Commission really tried to go in length, Hitekani, in terms of trying to explain the difference between hate speech, or what other people can find offensive, and really also about the legal principles which determine whether an utterance qualify as hate speech. Take us through that as well.
Certainly, but listen, I mean, it almost seemed like the Human Rights Commission was at pains trying to detail exactly the depth in which they took these complaints seriously and went in detail on them to say they're trying to balance between hate speech and free speech, and saying that there's a lot of things to consider, there's law to consider to balance what the speech is said by Mr. Malema, if they constitute hate speech. And among the things that they balanced the speech against were the historical context that these things are said. For example, the issue of land, that there is, Mr. Malema is not saying these things aloof. there is historical context to them. Black people were dispossessed of land, and saying that we need to consider that. The other thing the Human Rights Commission said was to consider the entire speech, the context of it, because what you find is that there are parts of the text that alone may be hurtful, but in context, the entire speech does not constitute hate speech. Also saying that in none of his speeches is he calling for inciting violence or such. The other thing was to consider the facts behind what is saying and who is saying this to whom. For example, he's a black man talking about the injustices of the past, which includes the injustices done by white people on black people. So there are a number of things that need to be considered. But they were saying that although they don't find these utterances to be hate speech, they don't exonerate Mr. Malema of what he said, saying that as a leader he's supposed to take a bit more caution and responsibility in what he says.
Yeah, but of course, some people will not be happy with the Commission's findings. The de Klerk Foundation has reacted to the news.
Absolutely. I mean, apart from the de Klerk Foundation, you just have to look at the reactions on social media, on Twitter mostly. Some people saying that because it's a black chairperson who's giving the findings, it's already clear
so it's becoming a racial game.
It is, unfortunately. But the de Klerk Foundation says it's painful that the Human Rights Commission gave these type of findings and didn't find Mr. Malema guilty. But the Human Rights Commission, of course, has said that there is space for recourse for people who find that these findings don't favor them or they are not correct. They're saying that you can take the findings on review. So there is that space for organizations to do that.
All right. So you've also spoken to the EFF. Surely this is good news for them, isn't it?
This is good news for the EFF. I mean, what they're saying is that they welcome the news, obviously. But what they're also saying is that it's clear from the findings that whoever brought the complaints against them, whether the DA or the de Klerk Foundation, they're saying that these organizations were trying to suppress criticism on these different points that they were bringing forward: the issue of land, the issue of racism, the alleged racism among the Indian community to black people. So they're saying that they feel exonerated and they feel their cases have been made.
Yeah, and I suppose because we are now in a very sensitive period, Hitekani, heading to the elections, more robust speeches are expected to be made.
Exactly. I mean, going into the press briefing, it was, you almost feel like it may be a positive, obviously, or a very damaging finding for the EFF because of the time we're in. We're leading up to the elections, and a damaging or a guilty finding by the Human Rights Commission could have been quite hurtful for the campaign for the EFF.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for that update. Many thanks to our SABC News reporter, Hitekani Magwedze, joining us now live in studio. And of course, that is our question of the day. As we said earlier on, that the South African Human Rights Commission has found that comments that were made by the EFF leader, Julius Malema, do not constitute hate speech. So really, what we're looking for this afternoon is your thoughts on this. Send us your comments through to @SA_SABC. You can also send through your voice and video comments to our WhatsApp line. The number is 081 732 8421.